it failed to actually convert technology into value. What we did was we converted technology into a product. The platform was just like not ready to grow. Any type of like new ideas were just like, oh, no one wants to touch it. The software is too complex. No one understands it really. What I haven't done well enough in that situation is to challenge my context. One advice that I often give in coachings on trainings is,
oh my God, Dios mío, this is, oh my God, Dios mío.
Welcome to Hotfix. Our guest today is Tamer El-Hawari. Today, Tamer is a product management trainer and consultant. He is currently running Product Bench, which is a 6-week training program for PMs to level up their career. Before that, Tamer was CPO at Project A, one of Germany's most renowned VCs. Project A is an operational VC, and Tamer has worked as a product executive for more than 50 startups and companies during that time. In today's episode, we talked about the importance of domain knowledge for PMs. We talked about Tamer's failure story, which was about a large viability risk he should have tried to de-risk more carefully. And we had a great conversation about how PMs can empower themselves. Welcome to the show, Tamer.
hi.
Hey, I want to get started right away with the first question. And I think this can be quite exciting for a lot of listeners because you work as a product executive for a VC. And can you tell our listeners a little bit about what makes this so special?
Yeah, absolutely. I need to give you a little bit of background to that company because I think it's not a very common setup that we have in here. So the company is called Project A Ventures, and Project A is called like the operational VC, which means that there are actually two parts. On the one side, there is classical VC business, so starting and investing into companies, mainly in the tech area, pre-seed, Series A, also later for private equity investments. But also on the side after the investment, there was a team of over 100 people, experts in many different fields like marketing, sales, product, software development, whatever you actually need as a company when you want to get started. You want to have some people who know what they're doing and just like have the power to support them on the daily business. And I was on the operational side coming in when actually the investment has been done. And from there, I was just like able to collaborate with the companies on a very, I would say even a kind of like trustworthy environment. So there's a couple of things that were a little bit different. So first of all, because of the investment, we had some basic understanding of the company. So there was an investment committee challenging all these kind of things. We had a lot of information about the company. And then we worked like a agency or consultancy for them, but with the difference, and I think this makes a little bit of a difference to the classical consulting business, is that we had this kind of alignment of interest. So we had this mantra of, hey, we don't earn money by just like spending more hours at the company, but we earn money if the valuation of the company increases, and we're going to do a good exit together at the end of the day. So this was kind of important. And then I had the chance to actually work with a very diverse set of companies, which means I had some experience in, e-commerce. There were real estate, education technology, like robotics, like any type of industries. And this was super exciting to actually work with these kind of companies, even though you probably didn't have too much of experience in that specific field. And like when we worked together with ventures, like there was different types of roles that we had in there. So either we coach people, we did some projects like, hey, let's be more customer centric, let's do something about it. And we just like shaped a certain project. But mainly it was about like having some interims position and for my position, often then the interim lead position or interim CPO position for that kind of companies for a fraction of time, trying to help them grow and develop over time. And yeah, I think this was the very special thing. So I just like got to see a lot of companies, I would say, like roughly 50 companies where I worked intensively together with them on certain things. So you get to see a lot of different areas and aspects of product.
That is quite interesting. So I've very recently read a quote by Paul Graham who said you shouldn't pay for advisors in startup. You should make them invest in their business, and that incentivizes them to give you great advice. And I think that fits this philosophy quite well, right? Because in the end, you are very incentivized to just help the startup grow in the best possible way. But what I think there's this big debate. Do you need industry knowledge or knowledge about the problem very deeply to run a product team in a business? And for you, I imagine you have worked in various industries, various problems. How do you think about that, coming in and then maybe not having this very deep knowledge or having experienced this problem yourself?
I think that if you're a product manager, you can't work without any type of domain expertise. You need to have a deep understanding of that industry, of that set. So this is a downside. So of course, I can't imagine to become an expert in robotics if I just get started in these kind of things. What we did was, whenever we started with a company, the first thing that we did massively was to gather insights and gather domain expertise as fast as possible. So this was part of our nature. And in the beginning, in the first kind of companies, just like relied a lot on what the founder said and what kind of like information I got from the outside. But my career and my effectiveness of work just like increased dramatically when I started to just like get started and go through my playbook of understanding a certain domain and getting at least a basic understanding of what's going on in that industry, right? And this can be talking to a couple of users, making a competitor analysis, doing some field studies, like seeing how the customer group actually behaves in a certain field. And this is just necessary to be really good at that. And I would even say that most of the product teams, even if they're working for many years in a certain industry, sadly don't have enough customer experience or industry experience.
I think what's interesting is that recently we had a guest on a podcast, Mirella. She's running a product management agency. I think that she's deploying product managers on an even shorter tenure. Some of her product managers only stay at companies for 6 weeks. And she even has the opinion that it might be helpful sometimes if product managers don't have too deep domain knowledge, because it also reduces emotional attachment to a product. And then you also can act less biased. I think I'm more on your end when it comes to how much deep knowledge a product manager should have. I'm also starting at a new company in a month, and it's from an industry I have very little knowledge about, and I'm already starting to try to learn as much as possible because I think it helps. But do you think it's, and that's also very different compared to the position that I currently have, because the position I currently have started from a power user background, and I had a very big emotional attachment to what I think features would be good to be built, for example. So I can also understand Mirella's point. But do you think that you can also have too much domain knowledge as a PM?
This is a fairly good question. And I would say, yes and no. Like, first of all, I think Mirella is doing a very, very tremendous job and doing a lot of good work with her company, product people. So yeah, like for me personally, I very much learned that I need to have insights, and I need to have better insights and trying to be better informed as the founder. I mean, I know this is like a very high ambition, but as a mantra, it just like really works for me because I need to bring something new to the table whenever we have discussions. I figured out that any type of discussions that I have with a founding team or under other industry experts, that I can't just talk to them on eye level if I don't have additional knowledge that I can bring to the table to make decisions, right? And for this decision making, I just need to have this domain expertise and this kind of knowledge. Of course, there is a risk of getting, let's say, too much knowledge that might gonna give you the feeling that you know how things work out and you just behave like that. Because this is what you observe in many industry experts. They know how it works and they behave like that. Yes. And this comes with the problem that it's hard for you to actually step back and find a different way of solving a problem and getting to a next level of innovation, right? And for me personally in my role so far, I never came to the situation where I said I have so much experience in that domain. And I think it's also not part of my personality, but rather staying curious and understanding that there's always a new thing that I can learn. So even there's a risk, I would still go for building up domain expertise as much and as best as possible with the best possible information.
And I believe an experience I made over the last couple of years hiring PMs that are coming outside of the industry, what I realized is that they don't know what's impossible yet. So PMs within the industry very often come with a notion of, this is impossible, this doesn't work, this is not how things are done in this industry. And PMs coming from the outside, maybe coming from a different industry where things are done differently, they try to apply that in this new industry they start working at, and sometimes it just works. And this is where real innovation can happen, where suddenly you can change fundamental flaws in how things are done in certain industries. And I think there is many where industries exist for 200 years and then they just didn't change some aspects of it because they didn't know that they could change it. They didn't know that this is part of the rules, that you can just change behavior and by that innovate very drastically.
100% totally agree with that. I think that the product mindset needs to be consistent of multiple perspectives that you put into your equation when you think about certain things, right? So in one dimension, if we're talking about the customer centricity or domain expertise, if I want to extend it a little bit more, then you have the tendency to just like reproduce existing patterns and you're not able to, let's say, put a certain efficiency grade or effectiveness grade into the existing thing. But on the other side, as a product manager, I also need to look at, for example, technology. And just like say, okay, what's going to be doable with technology? What can I get out of it if I would use it in a different way, and question these kind of habits and certain like standards in an industry, plus also looking at the business side and understanding, okay, isn't there a different business model that I can take for this? And what I mean by that is that I think that every product manager should have a certain curiosity in mind to ensure that he's not getting too lazy about what he knows in order to get some shortcuts about his decision making, but rather constantly look for additional information, right? So yeah, I think it's just like not about having the perfect information before you actually get started, but it's more about like which kind of learning curve do you have along the time, and is it going flat over time, or is it still growing no matter how much you know about certain things? And I think gathering knowledge is so widespread in the field of product that it's really, really hard, even after a couple of years of being in one company or an industry, to just like not see the end of something. I think that's not going to happen. It's like a backlog. It's not going to be empty.
And have you had an industry where you worked in where it was hard for you to spend a lot of time with it and to learn from more? Or do you have
definitely.
some...
Like, especially in low scale B2B business, like low scale, I mean like that doesn't have too many customers, and which is very much deep tech B2B stuff, where it's going to get harder to actually talk to customers and talk to users and getting into these kind of things. So I mentioned the case of robotics, like before you actually get into an industry side and talking to system integrators, for example, there's a lot of effort that you need to take in order to get these kind of information. Right. Yeah. But then you need to start to get creative. But yes, like it's not always easy, but just like asking questions is where it all begins. And most of the time people can give you an answer.
Yeah. I also think that the most amusing part or the best part about product management is when you talk to customers and you see that you solve problems for them. And then when you solve them, it actually doesn't really matter what industry it is.
I totally agree. Right. This kind of moment when you talk to a customer, and he's giving you a very obvious issue that you heard also from other customers, and you say like, how could we not have thought about this? And then just start to implement it. And even better, if this then transferred into money at the end of the time, like so you can buy customer value with real impact that you do on the business side. And if this comes together, like this is what my point of view makes this kind of role, it's probably the peak of excitement in that kind of situation.
Yeah, when you're basically creating a win-win situation for both.
Yeah.
For you. Okay, great, Tamer. If I would be a listener today and I heard that you worked for 50 different companies, I would think that, wow, I want to learn more of all the different experiences that you make. And we're going to get to this now. We're also talking about a failure story that you brought us today. And with that, I would just hand over for you to quickly guide us through what happened.
Yeah. So first of all, it's very, very interesting to look about a failure story, because if you recap, of course, so many things that I could have done differently, but I would like to share one story with you where I really tried to do my best, but really I would have done this kind of thing differently. And this boils down to a couple of learnings and insights that became generally true for me and really shaped the way how I approach product. So it wasn't the time when I worked for an e-commerce company. And yeah, I mentioned that I've typically worked in VC and startup environment. This company was actually already in the business for a couple of years, so it was more of a later stage investment. They were profitable. They had a very complex kind of product that they're building. So like this kind of like standard e-commerce solution didn't really work out for that. And like everything that they worked upon, like the entire platform that they had from a technological side was very much like from the past decade, I would say. Just like it was working, but it really grew from, like a couple of people trying to build an e-commerce platform to something that really made multiple millions of euros in revenue every year. And it was clear that the entire kind of company needs to have a certain new shop system. It needs to have new back-end operations, platform processes, or ERP system, however you want to call it, in order to just a company for the growth ambitions that everyone had, right? And this is like where things just came together, right? There was a lot of ambitions, of course, from the investor to grow that kind of company. There has been seen a lot of chances to actually grow. The CEO was very ambitious about growing the company. And of course, for the product and tech team, it was equally ambitious, right? Ambitious in order to say, hey, we are at the point where we can really make a difference in the industry. We can build a new platform, and this kind of platform will help us to grow into the future. And the point was, and this is part of the background information, is that the CEO itself was not very much of a tech person and not very much of a digital product person, right? And when he shaped his company strategy, he came with all types of interesting approaches that you can actually take, right? So there was, first of all, of course, you needed to have a great mobile first experience, great user experience. We want to connect to marketplaces. We want to run omni-channel, connect to offline stores, see the stocks of the online stores. We want to have personalization. Every customer should have its own setup. It should be scalable. It should be handling merchant acquisition. So it was on the play to actually buy other companies, competitors, and that they needed to integrate into this one. So in the end, we were just working with, I would say, a big pool of buzzwords and hot topics in that e-commerce industry. And of course, I mean, like we had the budget. And of course, we said like, okay, we're going to build the next level platform here to handle all these kind of things. So we started to conceptualize things and building it. And I was kind of comfortable with the team to build these things because I was working at Rocket Internet. We've been working a lot on building the e-commerce platform that they use for the international rollout. I had a couple of e-commerce experience. We did the foundation for a company like Spryker, like the technological basis for like building e-commerce. So I knew what I was talking about when I had all these kind of things in mind. We just like tried to make it work, right? Over time, we just said, okay, it doesn't really fit together. It doesn't really come to some kind of an end. Of course, we've built it and we've worked on it. And I still believe that the platform is great, but it failed to actually convert technology into value. What we did was we converted technology into a product. This is where things didn't work out as we should have done there. My mistake was to work with the information that I got instead of trying to find the risks, the flaws in the entire setup and really challenge hard about the approach and strategic moves we have taken. And I would have done this totally different nowadays, ever since I started to work like entirely differently on that topics.
So just to briefly summarize, you came in as a head of product or as an advisor? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And there was is it too harsh to say an MVP that, or a legacy platform?
It was a legacy platform. It was a legacy platform that did the job. Mm-hmm. And it was full of use cases and features and whatever. Mm. But it was just like a very old schoolish type of software, right? Okay. And no possibility to scale or deliver a next feature because the platform was just like not ready to grow. Any type of like new ideas were just like, oh, no one wants to touch it. The software is too complex. No one understands it really. Only one or two people really understood what was going on there. There was just like not very much feasible to add new things onto the platform.
And you were now in the situation that the company, they wanted to grow. They wanted to scale to different countries. as well. And for that, you also had to evolve the platform. And what happened? Did you still try to scale it, or did you try to rebuild it from the ground? What did you do, and what would have been a better decision to do?
Yeah. So what we did was we created the platform. Yeah, and it works. Like we did the platform. We just like got started and said like, okay, we need to have a new platform. And it was very much clear that we can't rely on existing standard solutions. So it needed to be a custom built thing because of the complexity of the product itself. And then we just like did whatever we can in order to build that kind of platform. And it was a good platform, like in the end. But the problem is that the launch itself was very much of an issue. We just like weren't able to roll out very sequentially, not really like the full platform, and like deadlines and whatever dragged on. Things were just like not so clear. We found edge cases over that we haven't covered yet. And the entire kind of like company and building that one was actually not there yet. Like we as a team, we knew how to build it, right? But I overestimated like how much we need to incorporate the existing maturity of the company, the knowledge set, the organizational limitations, and all these kind of things, which made the entire project very, very much a big hustle and really a problem for that kind of company. Not mainly because of the shop system, but, you know, like the entire side project, like was highly dependent on the ERP system. And especially on the ERP side, like wrong software selection, like really no possibilities to actually really go live with a platform end to end and just like really covering all use cases. And it really felt like whenever we came to a situation where we wanted to launch certain iteration, it was just like the timeline was extended and the feature set was stripped down, leaving up with a lot of uncertainties and risk and a bad feeling about like, okay, should we really launch it or not?
I can particularly relate to the organizational maturity, because I think this is something that most PMs most likely have experienced in their career.
Yeah.
So I, for myself, countless times, something was built within the product team. In these rooms, product managers discussed, how can we communicate this to the company? They did everything they can to communicate it to as many people as possible. In the end, something failed during launch or rollout, and then the conclusion was, next time we just communicate even better. This usually results in one more document that is created that no one reads, and the cycle just continues and continues. But I think this understanding of, is the organization even ready for this type of product? Can they deeply understand how to work with their customers, how to pitch this, how to implement this into the workflows of their customers? Is not that easy. It's not about just PMs communicating 5 times more and this problem is solved. It's much deeper.
Exactly.
The organization itself needs to be able to handle this.
And this is, Stefan, what you say is like exactly what I see as my biggest learning part from this one. So typically when I entered a company, especially in the early days of my career, I just like tried to work based on the given parameters, which mean in this kind of case, there was a strategy and all these kind of like cool features that we can build. And it sounded really good. And of course, like for a big company, how much would you question or argue that in kind of like whatever it is, like an omni-channel approach is the right strategic decision or not, right? And do you have the right team or not? And all these kind of things. So what I try to do is, as you mentioned, like always work with this mantra. I need to be better. I need to better communicate. I need to better specify. I need to better whatever. What I haven't done well enough in that situation is to challenge my context and first of all, create an environment where I can really strongly believe that I can make a difference in here. And this needs to be said before I can actually, or at least in parallel of like doing my own day-to-day work. It's not just like about me trying to be doing a better product job and improving all these kind of issues that you get just like approach from the outside, but really questioning the rest of it. Because what I've learned is that product people have a very special mind to think about certain things, right? And I think this connected thinking of challenging thing, this kind of like asking the question why, like which sounds sometimes annoying or even stupid sometimes, right? It's just like something that I figured out that not everyone is doing. And this type of mental mindset is important for a company if they have a digital product to really thrive. And this goes deep into not only like what you do in product, the delivery part or the discovery part, but also into the strategy part, like the product strategy, the goal setting, the roadmaps that you're going to create, but also like shining into the company strategy. And this doing it massively, the entire organizational structure. This is something that you can't just try to take over and try to do your best to do the best result out of the given parameters. But I learned that it's way more important to actively shape and develop and transform a company in their mindset to actually work product driven. Right? And most founders are not from a product background, at least not the ones that I've worked with. And this really made a difference.
I had a very similar situation once in my career where we tried to launch a product-led self-service motion, even though we were a very sales-driven company. And it was a very similar example because we launched it and the organization was totally not ready for it because the sales organization suddenly had less leads, and also our pricing was totally not made to be that transparent. And in the first episode of the Hotfix podcast, we talked to Niels Stotz. And what I really liked, what he said is that he's categorizing failure in 3 different categories. It's simple, complex, and intelligent failure. And I think this totally falls under the category of complex failure. And if you would think in the Marty Kagan's risks, I think it would fall under the viability risk. Does it work for the business?
Yeah.
And I think this is, from my experience, the most difficult one to de-risk, because you need to understand so many different parts of the business and how they play together. And you just mentioned, is the ERP system ready for it? That's very hard for a product manager to evaluate and decide. So do you think that these are even de-riskable as a product leader, these issues?
I think what you're bringing up is I think also a trend or a tendency that I currently see in product, where product people start to think more in terms of business, sales, marketing, getting closer to this one. I feel that there's quite some openness right now to not say, hey, this is product, and I try to define what my domain is, but rather trying to look into other aspects. And what I found out as well, and we've been talking about domain expertise and how to build this up. I mean, as a product manager, we often think about domain expertise, and then we think about customer and user centricity. But this is just like one out of, I don't know how many fields, probably 10, 12, 20 fields that you need to cover and really deeply understand. And what we often don't do is trying to understand the internal domain, like not only the external domain, like what is the customer, what is the market, what is the competitor, but trying to understand the company itself. Like how many people actually have access to let's say a P&L of a company, right? And the moment you get this kind of access, you can start to figure out, okay, this is your plan for the next year on how to make revenue. I mean, even though this is not a, like prediction into the future, but it gives you really great insights about, hey, do we need to work on revenue growth? Do we need to work on profitability? Or do we need to work on retention? Because there are this kind of like models, there's a lot of like implicit knowledge or expectations modeled in. And you as a product manager should understand this. At the moment, I think like you read about it, things becoming really clear. And suddenly like the decisions from a founder or whoever starts to become like very logical, right? And this is, I think that's something where there is no way out of it to just like really do this, because otherwise we are just like acting in the blind. And this is like, and I figured out that the risk that you're mentioning, that the product to value is getting so much better if you start to understand these kind of things. So one advice that I often give in coachings, on trainings is, like get into exchange with sales, get into exchange with marketing, try to read their KPIs, right? It's important for you to understand which customer lifetime value, if you have it, or ROAS values you can see, or how the funnel metric is going to look like. Of course, as a product manager, you might going to say, hey, I have so many other things to do. I don't need this, but this shapes so much of your perspective on certain things that the moment you do an action, you can really boil it down to marketing, sales, or valuable impact in the end.
Yes, and I believe this is also something that is so important for product leaders, because I think more often than not, they might have access to these kinds of informations. But I think in many companies, if you would ask them, let's say you take 100 Series A companies and you ask every PM in those Series A companies, when do you plan to raise your Series B? I would say in 99 out of 100 companies, they don't know. And this is a problem, right? Because if they would know we are trying to raise in 9 months, they could set initiatives that have impact towards this 9-month goal that result in a high valuation. But if they don't know at all, if they ever raise a Series A, are we maybe profitable in 2 years? Do we maybe sell in 5 years? Who knows? They know nothing about it. And suddenly they make bad decisions. And then the founders don't understand why are the PMs making bad decisions. And the PMs just don't even know that it's a bad decision because they're not aware of their circumstances. I think this is a very, very important point that you're making there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of like data foundation is key to everything. It's just like so easy to believe that you're on the right path. And then some expert in some whatever domain gives you this kind of little information that breaks down all your assumptions, and suddenly you understand, this is how it works, right? And no matter like how deep you are in certain fields, absolutely true. So getting the big picture is important, and I think this is like an important obligation of a product manager to be the one who's driving that. So it's very easy to say like, hey, I'm the product manager, you need to give me the information because you are my boss, you're my manager, you're whatever. But how can you, like, it's even hard for product people to understand which information they need. Like, how can you imagine another CEO being clear about which information they need to hand over to the product people so they can make the right decisions? And this kind of like, I don't want to call it passiveness or ignorance towards this kind of thing. I think it's a really, really big problem.
And with that, I think this is a great transition to the last part of the podcast, the provocative thought corner. And in a previous conversation, you stated the term empowered is too passive and PMs need to empower themselves. And I want to tie this into the conversation we had right now, because I think many CEOs just don't know what information PMs need. So they are not empowering, quote unquote, their PMs. So how can PMs empower themselves?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And this, just like to explain a little bit, this kind of empowered situation, like I had a couple of coaching situations or product lead question that they came to say like, hey, my team wants to work empowered. And say like, the next thing that we need to do is integrate this platform. That's very clear that the next half a year is going to be an API integration, but they want to work empowered. And the moment the product manager comes to me and say like, I want to work empowered, the question that I ask them is like, what gives you the credibility and what gives you the power to work empowered? Like it's often been like, hey, my manager needs to empower me. It's about me getting the freedom to do whatever I want, right? But on the other side, I think that you as a product manager need to take yourself the freedom and need to back and build yourself up to be empowered. So how do you work empowered? The first thing, and we've talked about it already, is definitely getting a great understanding of your domain. You need to be the one who knows most about the company and the environment, even more than what you think is in your scope of product, but even extended. What I mean by that is you should know your competitors, right? Often in my cases, the CEO knows best about the competitors, but I need to be better than my CEO in knowing about the competition. I need to understand the market better than sometimes. I mean, like this is really like setting the bar high, but like trying to understand the market better than this. I need to understand how my business model works better. I need to understand the technological trends right now and how they can influence certain things. Could be technical depth about our internet platforms, or could be any type of other innovation that happens in that field, new APIs, capabilities that are coming out of it. So I need to be the one who's knowing better about the customer and the latest issues that they have. And the interesting part here is that, like, two observations, you actually don't need that much time and not much thing to actually get going and start to be able to really talk about certain things. And the moment you have these first pieces of information, you can start in a conversation with stakeholders, sales, marketing, whoever that is, start not to just like discuss about if their feature idea makes sense or not. And, like say, getting into this, how to say no, into asking questions about certain things and how people conclude certain things. And the moment you start to gather these kind of information, you can start to get going, right? So this is the foundation. And this is what, when I join a company, I always do in the first place. The second thing that I try to do, empower myself, is a factor that is based on trust. Because people don't know what product teams are actually doing. And most of them are still valued by the output that they generate at the end of the sprint, right? So the second thing that I try to do in order to empower myself is getting into a good delivery. I mean, we bashed this kind of idea of a feature factory, but it doesn't really matter how much great discovery you do if you don't have a team that can deliver some kind of things. And what I try to do is just like, first of all, get the delivery up and running, while in parallel, like back up myself with a lot of knowledge to understand what's going on the outside. And then there comes the next part. I can start to work on strategies. I can understand what I need to do next. Like, imagine I'm going to be the CEO. What would I do next in order to drive best the value for the company? And suddenly you got full circle. You got your insights, you got your delivery up and running, and you got your strategic perspective going. And suddenly you can make really informed decisions and even discard features and not build features. But the moment you've bound yourself to the company success, you can show the effectiveness of your work, and it really works very well. Like, you don't need to have so many features to really drive business value. You just like need the few right features. And if you talk to 10 customers and they all gave you this sign of this kind of big problem, it's very, very hard not to be successful with that. It's like, So this is like it's a lot of topics, but in general, it's about like, don't trust your environment, don't trust the information that you get out of the organization, but get your own fresh new knowledge, and then to drive it in a way that it actually works. Of course, collaboratively, and it's not like an agent trying to infiltrate the company. It's more like collaboratively to just gather insights and bring it back again and discuss it, right? And it's interesting how this kind of approach changes the culture. So people not approaching you with features, they're going to approach you with additional questions. Hey, Tamer, you have done this. What were the insights?
And I believe that putting this to yourself is also just a much easier way to success. So what I mean with this is, if you started a company, you realize, no, I'm in another feature factory, you quit after 6 months, you join the next company, no, I'm in the next feature factory, you quit after 6 months, you will probably not be successful in your career. And I believe that in most companies that would be called feature factories, there is maybe under the same PM lead, there's one PM working empowered. They work in every way, shape, or form as it is described in like most books of how product management should be. And then there's one of their colleagues directly next to them, same company, same strategy, same manager, who works in a blueprint of feature factory. So I would highly assume this is not the environment that is bringing one to work in a feature factory and one to work in an empowered product team. It must be themselves, right?
Absolutely.
In the end, you have so much power as a PM to empower yourself, to drive this value. If you know more about the industry than your CEO, people will let you make decisions because they believe that you can make those decisions. If you know more about the customer, they will let you decide how to solve their problems because they believe it's a good idea. In the end, the CEO wants to have a valuable company, or they want to drive business or whatever. If they believe that you can do that, I believe that you will be empowered. It's, in my mind, very simple.
Absolutely. And there's a simple principle that I like to live by, which is what I tell every product manager in my team is, don't ask for permission, ask for excuse. I'm not going to rate you for making bad decisions. I'm going to rate you for making no decisions at all. Right. And if someone tells me, hey, can I talk to the customer? Think about your professional integrity and trying to run a good product job. If you see it for yourself as a limitation, this would probably be the better reason to quit a company. If someone says like you run a couple of interviews and then saying you should not ever do it again. This is probably, I would say, the better reason to quit a company rather than working in a feature factory, but rather trying to drive certain change. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that PMs, or the ability to empower themselves, is a very underrated skill. And what I've seen work the best is a combination of three things, which is curiosity, proactivity, and then ultimately getting shit done. And I think if
Yes.
a product manager has these skills, founders are happy to back up and not dictate the next feature. They then ultimately will have the trust that they will deliver better things that they could conceptualize themselves. But I think what's still important is that this won't work if product managers have no idea about the strategy, have no idea about what the actual vision of the founder is, even though they are curious to discover problems themselves. And then if they suggest something that is completely unaligned with what the founder actually wants their product to develop to, it still won't work. And I think that's the task of a good head of product, to make sure that PMs can actually empower themselves.
Yeah. And you can use all the skills that you have. I mean, like, take your CEO and put it in the shoes of a user and run a couple of interviews with him. I mean, not this kind of like interviews as you would do it in a professional setup, but rather go for a coffee with him if the company is not big enough, right? Or take whatever manager and ask him, hey, what's success for you right now? What is success for the company? And try to get an alignment on this level with a simple question. This already, it's not structured. It's not, like this decision stack framework fully built up. But it often doesn't need that kind of thing. It's just like talking to each other and making sure that you are like trying to get these information, and they're typically there. Like, as a founder, you often have problems. You're not sitting there and writing down your strategy document on 20 pages. Like, I've seldom seen that.
Yeah.
But totally agree to what you're saying.
It's also a very actionable tip that you're giving there, because every PM could just pick up the Slack or whatever they use to communicate in their company right now and send a message to their CEO or whoever other head of a department and ask questions. And in my mind, this also creates credibility for them.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Very often the CEOs are just not asked these questions. And if suddenly PM comes around and they ask these questions that they think, good thing that they are asking, good thing that they want to know these things, good thing that they are trying to get to the bottom of this, simply asking the question without doing anything else already creates a lot of credibility for this person. And I think everyone listening could simply ask a question to their CEO or whatever other person they need now.
And I mean, you might be astonished. Like, I had this situation a couple of times where me or one of my team members actually argued a lot against the CEO, right? And as a CEO, you typically, or as an upper manager, you're typically very good at arguing and pushing back and like trying to get your try to move things forward. But it also happened quite a lot that a CEO like later on came to me and said, like, thank you for not just like doing what I've said. And I had it a couple of times where I said, like, okay, that's really, really great to hear. So as a product manager, you're often, of course, paid by that person, right? But like, some founders just like want to get hands off, and they can't get hands off because the people haven't empowered themselves. And this is like creating a vicious cycle that doesn't really help you to move forward. And I found it very interesting to understand that sometimes just like better to not even deliver the features or tell the founder, hey, you know what? You asked me to do these 3 things. I didn't do it because of this and that reasons. And we are good to go. We're reaching numbers. We are like having a platform better than we had before. What do you want from me? Like, do you want another feature, or should we just like continue professional product work? Like, and suddenly you can just like bring this kind of forward. So like, there is this kind of like tendency of product people, especially when they're employed by some kind of company, to just like push back. But I figured out that it's highly important to actually do it. And it's just like so relieving. Like, it makes the job so much simpler.
Amazing. I think these are great words to end the episode for today. Tamer, thank you for joining and sharing your wisdom with us. I think there were many different treats and new things that also I learned. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to our channel. We'll be back soon. Thank you, Tamer.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.